I had a fantastic meditative session yesterday. So rejuvenative. I don't tend to talk about them too often because I think they're hard to relate to if you're not engaging in it. And I hate when I see people engage in things that they don't talk about or that they make so abstract. So I want to speak. I want to try to be very, very precise as to like what I experience when I engage in meditation, because the word meditation doesn't do it justice. Saying I meditate, it can mean a variety of things, and I think meditation has a variety of like different expressions and manifestations. And people use the term woo woo for describing when that's like it's meant to be a pejorative for the superstitions and the a lot of the fictions that people profess, a lot of the magic, and like there's a ghost that enters me and stuff. But and so I'm not on that. I don't like that. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in, the best way to describe it is objective truths in a subjective experience. Objective truths with my subjective experience. And one of the things that I see, one of the quote unquote objective truths in my subjective experience, when I really, really, really dive inward and I enter into you could say it's a bit of a trance-like state. What I've noticed is this thing that we call the ego is real. Yesterday, I experienced some form of ego death again. And again, even when talking about ego death, it's like, what are you even saying? What are you talking about? And I was thinking, how can I explain this? What this feels like? What this is? The best way to explain it, I think, and I mentioned this before, it is like there's the me talking right now, and the me talking right now, when I carry on this momentum, this quote unquote, when somebody says, I know you, that's not your personality, that's not you. If you're in a different mood, have you ever gone to your workplace or just in a family environment with your friends, anybody, and you have a different shift in energy, a different shift in chemistry, and you're behaving like you might have a different kind of way of being, right? And let's say you're being true to that different way of being. I'm sure at some point of your life you've had somebody tell you, "Oh, this is not the John I know, or this is not the Jane I know," but it could be you. What we tend to do is we tend to ensure that that particular person who people perceive us to be, we even allow that particular person to exist even while we're by ourselves. People tend to, and I'm not saying this is something even malicious, even, this is just something so human. What people tend to do is they tend to want to, we know they want to put you in a box, right? But that's typically talked about when just even like the people want to put me in a box because I want to be a chef, and nobody, people put me in a box. I really want to be a gymnast. It's not even just about like people putting you in a box because they don't see you engaging in a profession. People put you in a box because they don't even want to see your quote unquote personality change. One way a young lady had described me years ago, she said, she said, you're like James McAvoy in Split. She said, and it was one of the best descriptions I've ever heard. Because everybody who always tries to like tell me what I am, they're always wrong. And they always have an example that I don't believe is accurate. But describing me as the character in Split was the most accurate. The reason why is because you know that song, uh, uh, it's a bittersweet symphony that's like. He says, I'm a million different people from one day to the next. I can't. I'm a million different people in such a subtle way. I'm not claiming that, like the character in Split, I lose myself and all of a sudden I'm a little boy who doesn't know that I'm a grown man. But the little boy sometimes comes out. The stern, serious dude sometimes comes out. Just the crazy person sometimes comes out. The goofy comedic sometimes. And everybody would say, yeah, well, everybody's that way. But do we all honor that? Do we all honor that? Do we all allow everybody to be the variety of things that they could possibly be? Or do we sort of make remarks and suggestions and sort of like passive aggressively try to pressure each other to just be one kind of way all the time? Do be more predictable, please. Oh, your mood. Oh, I don't want you to be in a kind of blue state because it makes me uncomfortable. Going back to the ego death, right? So what happens when you observe purely what's going on in your mind, which is such a hard thing to just speak to because it's one of those things that's more of a do than I think about. It's like, man, we could talk all day long about what it's like to look at your thoughts and observe them non-judgmentally. But it's another thing to be engaged in that process. Because when you do, when you have successfully achieved that in that moment, it's not a light, nothing is a light switch. This is all about like an effort. When you have successfully or being a witness unto what's transpiring in your mind, and you're a non-judgmental witness, you're a still witness, you're just there as if you're air itself. You're observing as if you are oxygen observing the world. When you enter into that place, that optional place in your mind, what happens is, I would say, what objectively happens in my subjective experience, I shed this notion of Marcus. And in that moment, you are so fully entrenched in the now becomes so epitomized, now becomes so profound that nothing else seems to even be of importance. Nothing else seems to even be of concern. Not in a blissful hee ha ha, I'm in la la land kind of nothing matters. But rather you realize that you're now in a different kind of, you know how you could say it's a state to constantly focus on the future? Let's put it like that. You can arguably, you could say it's a mental state of being. And this is something I do just naturally. Like if I just like left to my own devices, me not pursuing meditative practices at all, a worry wart about everything that's going to happen in the future, about me. I'm just trying to imagine all kind of like, the variety of scenarios. My brother calls it going into the danger room. It's a X-Men reference. And I do the same thing. And I know many people do, especially if you have some kind of neurotic inclination. But you start being really fixated on what could happen, imagining all kinds of different possibilities. And there's also people who are super fixated on the past. And also, we're all capable of it and we all do it. I'm not even saying it's just people who do this, people do that. We all do these things. And some of us do it to more intense, consequential degrees than others. If it's a state of being to be fixated on the future, if it's a state of being to be fixated on the past, if it's a state of being to have kind of a dualistic kind of focus on both, then the argument then is that it's a state of being to be fully in the present, being indifferent to the future, indifferent to the past. Not that you're ignoring them, because it's a temporary state. Let's get something straight. It's temporary. You can ignore it. It's not something, I can't stress enough. None of this is light switch, now I'm forever different. Not that I maybe it's possible, I haven't experienced that. It's all a state of being that's an achievable state of being through a kind of effort, through a particular kind of practice. And when that ego sheds, I realize that this is all still like, my insecurities are gone. I don't care, if somebody perceives me in XYZ kind of way, whether good or bad, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like Marcus is an idea. Ego death is the death of an idea. Of course I exist. This is not about do I exist? In philosophy 101, the first question you're asked, is that does the table really exist? Why does it exist? And then you go like, why does it? Because you can touch it, because you could this and that. But like, how do you know if what you're touching? Okay, this is not for me about whether or not we exist. This is not for me about whether or not this is real. This is about a state of being. It's about a mode of being. And this mode of being where you have been, the burden of the future and the past has been lifted from you. And then you are fully anchored in the present. That's a state of being that tends to demolish ego, that tends to demolish this notion of I have a personality. Because then you're much more like water, and you could in one moment be laughing about something, one moment be utterly serious, another moment just be completely dry. You're just whatever, wherever the wind takes you from one moment to the next, letting go of whatever happens from one moment to the next. And it's just very freeing. It's very, very freeing. You don't realize how much weight you're carrying from feeling as though, even subconsciously, a lot of this is extremely subconscious. You feel beholden to all kinds of notions as a result of our social conditioning. Um, I digress. I encourage you to sit in stillness and in silence for at least 30 minutes and to non-judgmentally observe what's occurring in your mind and look at it as also one of the realizations I had. It's all just physics. It's not personal. That's only something I can realize when I reach these meditative climaxes. None of this is necessarily personal. It's just so interesting, man. And it sounds like mumbo jumbo until you see it. But you can't see it until your chemistry adjusts. And your chemistry can't adjust unless you are like doing something to thwart it. Because we are all caught up in a particular kind of momentum that's very rigid, whether good or bad. And that rigid momentum kind of prevents us from having a kind of opening. That's why I haven't tried mushrooms. I have no doubt about the claims of mushrooms. I have no, I know that edibles can even assist in this process. The difference, that here's the issue. The thing is that people tend to use these things purely for stimulative reasons as opposed to therapeutic psychological maneuvering reasons. Like I look at like something like an edible as a way of breaking your chemistry's current momentum, so that you can now have a kind of internal opportunity to see things in a more fresh kind of way, and then take that for what you will. All right, peace out.